Good afternoon, everybody. Or should I say, good morning or good evening? Because at the moment we have people from 24 different countries attending this webinar. And the difference between the earliest time zone and the latest time zone is about 12 hours. We have people from the East Coast of the United States, and we have people from Taiwan and a lot of countries in between those two. So for the people from the US East Coast, it must be like 7:30 in the morning now, and in Taiwan, probably around 7:30 in the evening. The number of registrations is beyond our expectations for this time. We have 469 people registered, and at this very moment, we have 275 people that are already connected and still connecting. Some people may not attend the live webinar, but that's not a problem. And that counts also for the people who are attending the live webinar. This webinar is recorded. That means that afterwards you will be able to look at again if you want to. My name is Pedro de Reikere. I'm the head of Qctr, the CTI department within the Center of Cybersecurity Belgium, and I'll be your host for today. First, I want to share a few words with you about the agenda for this afternoon. Normally, our director, Miguel de Breuker, would have given an introduction right after me, but unfortunately, last minute, Miguel had to cancel his participation due to other urgent matters. Nevertheless, Miguel is sending his greetings to all of you. The first speaker for this afternoon will be Katrien Eggers, CCB communication expert. She'll talk about the European Cybersecurity Month and CCB's National Awareness Campaign. After Katrien, we will invite Kevin Holvoet on stage. He's a cyber threat intelligence analyst at CCB Qctr, and Kevin will explain to you a new CCB project that we will start up soon. It's about CCB's project called CertiHunt, or chasing expired certificates in Belgium. Next on stage will be Joost Dam. Joost
Yeah, hello everyone. It seems that Pedro has lost his internet connection. Things happen. So I'll just take over from here. So we had the.
I'm back.
Yes, okay. I'll leave it there, Pedro.
Yeah, it's a technical problem. I don't know what happened. My internet just went down. But anyway, I was just saying that. No, thank you. I was just saying that after Kevin, Joost Dam will be joining us on stage. He's a CISO of PSA Antwerp. And Joost will bring you a story about an Emotet attack that took place a few weeks ago. Emotet attacks on the rise by Joost Dam. Then we will have a short break. And we will resume after 10 minutes with the anatomy of a large-scale DDoS attack. And that is brought by Dirk Jumpert, security manager at URIT. And of course, we have no Qctr without our expert panel talk. This time we have a few experts that will be joining the panel. Joost Dam, PS Antwerp. We have Noor Fatin, well known already, Noor Fatin at Recorded Future. We have Johan Kaloui, who is a CCB Cert BE expert. We have Frank Runewege from Fox IT, and everything will be moderated by Kevin Holvoet. Before we start with the webinar, I want to share with you a few practical things. We have a chat room. The chat room is the place where you can meet and discuss with your colleagues from all over the world. It's funny talk, just relax, nothing special. But it's important to know that questions that are asked in the chat room will normally not be answered. Therefore, we have our question room. In the question room, you can ask your official questions. If the moderator sees any question that is intended to be asked to the guest on stage, then the moderator will ask your question live. If that is not possible, other moderators back end will try to answer your questions in the question room itself. And of course, we have also a poll section where we will ask you a few questions. Please please answer to our questions that we ask you, because the results of those polls are very interesting for us to know more about what your thoughts are about this webinar. And now I want to call the first speaker on stage, Katrien Eggers. Katrien, would you mind to join us on stage, please?
Hello, everyone. Here I am.
Katrien, welcome. I'm going to leave you all alone, all by yourself on stage. I'm giving the floor to you. Success.
Thank you. Thank you, Pedro. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katrien Eggers. I'm Communication and Press Officer at the Center of Cybersecurity. That means that I'm responsible for press relations, corporate communication, and awareness campaigns. And it's about the awareness campaigns that I will talk to you this afternoon. I'll share my screen. And there we go. So every year, as some of you know, we are having an awareness campaign at the Center for Cybersecurity, and we do it during the Cybersecurity Month. This year, it's always in the month of October, and we are always doing that together with the Cybersecurity Coalition. Now, every year we have a team, and this year the team is how to secure your accounts with two-factor authentication. Last year it was about phishing, not surprisingly, and the year before it was about backups and updates. So, in the beginning, how it started. In the beginning, it was fine to have a simple password. It was the only way to protect your account. But then it had to be more complicated and more complex. And later on, you had to change your password every 3 months. And that's where we became frustrated. The user became really frustrated. And that's why we found very nice workarounds. And honestly, to be honest, this is now how it's actually going. We're not having strong passwords. We're not using strong passwords. We asked Scattered Secrets to make us a top 30 about the passwords in Belgium, the most used passwords in Belgium, between 15 and 20. And as you can see, on top of the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not surprisingly, people are bored. They don't want to use those passwords anymore. And what is it that they're doing? They're using too easy, too short passwords. So the campaign of this year is all about encouraging people to use another layer. The message of our campaign of this year is protect your online accounts with two-factor authentication and use a password manager. And the goal, of course, is that more users use two-factor and password managers. The catchphrase is passwords are a thing of the past. And I will talk about that later, but that's for now. In September, we did a small survey on our Facebook page, and there we learned that 40% of the users know what two-step verification is and use it. But on the other hand, 33% has never heard of two-step verification. And then there's another problem. There are a lot of people who know what it is, often do not use it yet, because they simply don't know that the possibility exists. For example, 57% of Facebook users do not know that two-step verification is possible or how to do it on Facebook. And the same applies to users of Twitter and Instagram. So that's an important lesson for us. And then another thing that we saw, that the most common method for two-step verification is a text message with a code, but People also know the authentication apps like It's Me in Belgium or Google Authenticator. A lot of people already know what a token is, and the biometric method is also more or less known by almost half of the users. Traditionally, in cybersecurity, we talk about awareness campaigns. Between Belgium, we want to go one step further. We want to change behavior of the people. Well, there exist a lot of models about behavior change. I'm not going to talk about that here now, but there's one thing that you have to know. People change their behavior only step by step. And sometimes it can take days, weeks, months, or even years until they go from one step to another. The first step, of course, is ignorance. People simply don't know that there is something wrong. They don't know about two-factor authentication. That's the first step. The second step is that they are conscious but not worried. And in cybersecurity, it's often, so what? I've got nothing to hide. Okay, that's something we all know, I guess. The next step is that they are concerned but innocent, and they have something like solve it for me. That are the people that will say, okay, two-step verification, but Facebook should make it easy and should do it for me. They have to protect me. It's not my responsibility. The next step, that is that they are hesitating. They say, okay, I know that there is something like two-factor authentication. I know that it's important to have it, but I'm not starting today. Well, it's for later. Next step is that they'll say, okay, tomorrow I open Facebook and I'll make a two-steps verification working. And then they see, oh, it works and it's not that difficult at all. And then they can go to another step. They experimented it once at Facebook, and they will try it for other accounts as well. And then at the end, you have the adopted users that use it and that they have the desired behavior all the time. But as I told you, it can take years and months until someone goes from one step to another. So in our campaign and in every campaign, it's important to have material and actions for every one of these people, because people in our population, our target group is the Belgian population, and they are at different stages of these steps. So we need actions to attract attention. For example, our catchphrase, hey, passwords are a thing of the past. You need actions to inform them so that they really know what two-factor authentication is. You need actions to convince them. Why should you use two-factor authentication? Why is it safer? It's not that difficult at all. You also need actions to support them. So for people that really don't know how to start it, how to do it. And sometimes it's interesting to make two-factor authentication mandatory, or to use the technique of nudging. That simply means that two-factor authentication becomes the most easiest and the most obvious solution for you. So in our campaign, we have a lot of material to attract people's attention. We have our slogan, we did a press conference, we have a video, radio, posters, banners, social media, bank terminal, metro actions. I'll show them right now. So our slogan, our catchphrase, we have it in 4 different languages. We have the 3 national language, Dutch, German, and French. And we have English as well. That's important for enterprises that use it on their internal networks. So the 1st of October, every year we have a press conference and we have a press release for press, also to attract people's attention to our campaign. And then every year also we have a video, and the video is made to surprise people. And now, Kevin, you can show the video.
Waarde wachters, laat mij dit account betreden.
Heb ik een wachtwoord?
1, 2, 3, 4. Nee, iedereen. Kan een beetje sterker, hè. Met hoofdletters en ook cijfers, kom. Laat, met een hoofdletter. De ridder binnen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ook met speciaaltekens. Laat, met een hoofdletter. De ridder binnen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Underscore, slash, hashtag, schuine streep, komma, dubbelpunt, uitroepteken, uitroepteken, uitroepteken. Geen hashtag. Was dat voor dat uitroepteken? Ja. Bestaat al. Hallo jongen, hoe kan dat nou? Kom polyester, we zijn hier weg. Die hebben we goed liggen gehad.
Wachtwoorden zijn niet meer van deze tijd. Bescherm je online account met 2-stapsverificatie. Meer info op safeonweb.be.
Wachtwoord. Hallo brood, amusement.
Okay, I heard the video is over now. So we made this to make people curious, to catch their attention. You see that people will recognize the castle. It's a small castle in Belgium. A lot of people know it. People recognize the actors. But what we really want them to recognize is the frustration about passwords. Everyone is frustrated. And that is a sentiment that we wanted in this video. And after that, people have to say, yes, I am frustrated as well. What can I do to avoid passwords? And that's the point where we want them to go further, to click towards our website, or to ask more information. So the video will be broadcasted on local television and a lot on social media. We have the same, but then in the version of radio spots. We have posters and banners as well. And we have the support of a lot of banks in Belgium, which is very, very nice because they publish it on the bank terminals during some weeks. And that's really, really nice. We also have an action in the Metro. And we have an advertisement on their newspaper. The newspaper is called Metro. And we distribute gadgets as well. And then for the next step, more information, because all what I showed you now was just to attract people's attention. But to give them more information, we have our website, we have a YouTube channel, we have a folder, and we have a PowerPoint presentation. So on the website Save on Web, you can find more information about what two-factor authentication is, why you should use it, etc. We have that available also in 4 languages. It's very easy to read. It's for a really broad public. The same applies to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, and there we have small video clips about the themes that explain it a little bit, explain the same thing, how to use two-factor authentication, how to use strong passwords and a password manager. And then we have a folder as well, and we also have a PowerPoint presentation that teachers can use in schools or in companies when they have it about, when they want to tell something about two-factor authentication. And then very important for the next step, how to convince, support people, how to make it mandatory, how to use nudging. For that part, we really need partners because some of these things had to be done face-to-face in a classroom, etc. And we already have a lot of partners, more than 500 for the moment, private, public, academic world. And that's where I come to my call to action to you, because yes, we need you. The strength of our campaign lies in the cross-media approach. People see and hear the campaign on social media, TV, radio. They read about it in the newspapers, by the press, and they learn about it at work or at school. And in different places, different steps in behavior change are reinforced. And that's why you, the partners, are so important for us. Now, how to become a partner, it's not really complicated. It's free of charge. You just have to provide your name and email address to us, and then you have the materials available, long before the actual campaign starts, because from the 1st of October, all the material is available in the 4 languages on our website. But partners, they also receive the source documents so that they can adapt, put their own logo on it, etc. Of course, all the materials may be used, personalized, and shared, but only for non-commercial purposes. So it's too early to evaluate our campaign. In November, we have a survey to evaluate. But the reactions on social media are very nice for the moment. The professional side, there you see people that say, oh, nice, this is really an attractive video about two-factor authentication, well done. And here, the Simon Alossery, it's in Dutch, but he said, oh, a long time I trusted on complex passwords, but this campaign just convinced me to install the Google Authenticator app. That's really nice because it was not only his attention that was attracted, but he really changed his behavior. And then on Facebook, we have a lot of, like let us say, fans that really like the video clip. So we caught their attention. Now we have to go one step further and make them change their behavior as well. And what we really like is that our campaign is also noticed in even in America by Lance Spitzner. Lance is director at SANS Institute. We know him very well because we followed the SANS awareness course. And it's really nice that he likes the video as well and the way we did it. So that's for so far, but the real evaluation will come in November. So that was it for me. I hope you have a nice afternoon after this. And I'm going to give the floor to Pedro.
Okay. Thank you very much, Katrien. How was the stress?
It went fine. The only stress was clicking on the PowerPoint.
It was a great presentation, a lot of information that has been shared here. So thank you very much, Katrien. I've seen that your colleagues have answered already all the questions online, so there are no questions anymore for you. So thank you and have a nice afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Katrien. Bye-bye. So next on stage, I think that a lot of people here already know him. Next on stage is Kevin Holwood, Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst at CCB Citrus. And Kevin will explain to you a new CCB project. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Let's see in the chat if everybody can hear me, if sound is okay. Okay, cool. Quick sound check. Katrien, maybe a question for you. Can you please disable your screen share? Because it's still sharing for now. All right, let me share my own. There we go. Nope, wrong presentation. That's for the next one. And we have this here. Okay, cool. All right, so I have some issues with my presentation. Apparently, there is a certificate that's expired. So, but I'll just go into it. See if I can go further. You know, isn't that what we always do? Let's go there. Oh, it says server couldn't prove. I don't really care. You know, just continue to my page. All right, cool. So, who am I? I'm Kevin Holwood. I'm a cyber threat intelligence analyst at the Center for Cybersecurity Belgium, and I'm a part of the CTI team, the Cyber Threat Research and Intelligence Sharing Team, or for short, Citrus. You can reach me on this email address, or you can reach me on Twitter if you don't like mail. Problem here is my certificate was expired, and I'm sure one of you guys already cracked this PowerPoint presentation, so I hope nothing will go wrong here. Now, an introduction to CertiHunt, to you know what the issue is here, and what we want to do about it with CCB. This afternoon, very shortly, in 15 minutes, we'll discuss why we should secure, why we should use TLS on our websites, how does HTTPS work, greatest issues we have, what is Certihut, what is the project itself, and how do we fix this? Now, why do we secure a connection? Why is there something like TLS or the transport layer security, and something that was before known, but we don't talk about it anymore, SSL, forget it. It's only TLS at the moment. So this is mostly used together with HTTPS, which is a protocol used for websites, for visiting websites. So on a daily basis, you use HTTPS, I'm sure of it. Most websites, your bank websites, all the social media over there is all encrypted with HTTPS. Now here on the right, we can see what browsers show you these days. Okay, it's a little bit outdated. They changed again, but it's to get the message over to you. So if everything is fully secure, if everything is completely okay, we will see this secure message, or now just a green little lock there. If you use HTTP, or you don't use any secure connection, you don't use any encryption at all, you will see that not secure part. But if you're a bad sysadmin and you misconfigured your HTTPS connection, your web server, your customers will see this, and this is bad. I mean, we all learned with our awareness campaigns that in the previous years that if you see something like that, don't click it. What do people do? As I did in the beginning of the presentation, they still click it. Now, SSL, or TLS, is used for three things. It's used for encryption, ensure that we secure and we have some privacy on the exchange of our information on that connection. It's a way to authenticate with the web server, to say or to know as a customer, as somebody visiting some random website on the internet, is that actually the web server of the owner of that website? So there's some authentication happening there. This is, by the way, the main reason for expiring certificates, to reactivate those certificates so that okay, it's still the same guy. He just every year, because every year you have to do it now, every year he pops up a new certificate for his own website. I see a question there. Yeah, plain HTTPS is indeed worse than unsigned HTTPS. That is true in a sense that people, when they see HTTPS, they think that everything is secure. When they see HTTP, they think, okay, it's fine, it should be okay. I know people can see it, but I don't care. I'm fine here with HTTP. But if it's HTTPS and the browsers don't tell you that there's something wrong with that connection, then there's a sense of false security there, and that's what browsers want to avoid. That's why there is the fully not secure thingy there on the bottom. So websites use HTTPS for more trustworthy for their users. It improves search engine optimization. Google just puts you higher if you have a valid HTTPS, and there is no warning in the browsers. Now, how does HTTPS work? Very, very quickly. HTTPS goes from your browser. You try to visit the website. You send a hello to your server. It sends back a hello. There is some certificate exchange. You check in your browser if you trust that certificate, and once you trust that, you set up that connection, and that you're finished. Now, how does the browser know this? If something is secure, there is this thing called signing. In your browser or on your computer system, you will see a lot of things like which are called root certificates or public root certificates, and every certificate authority has this root certificate or multiple of these in-house. They sign intermediate root certificates, and these intermediate root certificates are then used to sign your website's SSL certificate. So if we look at this in a more clear example, in a real example, we have the ccp.belgium.be website. As we can see, if you click on that little button over there, little lock, you will see this screen. This is now in Brave, a Chrome variant, but you see, okay, certificate is valid, it's okay. If you click that, then you'll see something like this. And if you go to certification path, there you can see what is this root certificate that my browser is actually trusting here. So here you can see for ccb.belgium.be, we have ours that is signed by Gent C4. Then this one is signed by another intermediate, the user trusts something something, and this is actually coming from the root certificate from Centigo. Now, the greatest issues we see here, or we looked on the internet, and the greatest issues we saw in Belgian cyberspace and actually all over the world was expired certificates for random websites, for things that you maybe use as a test or whatever. But if it's if it goes to your main website, to your production website, it can cause a lot of damage to your brand reputation. It can cause a lot of trust from your customers to you, and probably a reduced revenue because people won't come there and won't buy anything if your e-commerce shop has an invalid certificate. This happened a couple of times in the past, by the way. There was some summer Ericsson, from Ericsson, the company, the telephone company, let a certificate expire in 2018, and that caused a big downtime on cellular service in the UK for a while. Equifax also had issues with their certificate. Now, we also have something like outdated or wrong configuration. That is something we have multiple, and there's a lot of configuration. I see a lot of things happening in the chat here. A lot of things that we can configure on a web server to make it more secure, to make our TLS, that connection more secure. I won't go into this. It's too broad, but just know that you need to keep that configuration up to date to the latest standards. An average cost per organization per year is apparently 11.1 million, according to the tsslstore.com. What is Certihand? What do you want to do here? The goal of Certihand is to clean up TLS configurations in the Belgian cyberspace. So what will we do in this project? We'll first track down bad TLS configuration. This includes expired configurations and the bad configuration, the things that we say this is not upheld by the standard. These use weak cipher suits. They use SSL v2 or v3, which is deprecated. Don't use it anymore. Afterwards, once we identified all of those web servers, we'll try to identify the owners of the web servers, which will be a very, very hard thing to do. But please, if you have any IP range that you can share with us, share it with us at ews@cert.be so we can identify your web servers. Now, afterwards, we will notify all those owners, and there should always be a thing which I'm trying to do now a bit, but we'll try to do it a bit more later, is more awareness and giving information to people, to sysadmins setting up an HTTPS server. How do we fix this? You can use TLS certificate life cycle management tools. Things like Global Sign or DigiCert or all the other providers, they normally include this in your systems. And please ask your questions in the questions tab. They will be answered shortly. Another thing is follow best practices. There is a link here, which is SSL Labs project's best practices. There is a link that goes to a GitHub page. This is updated every 3 to 6 months, and they update it with the last TLS versions that you can trust, which is at the moment actually only TLS 1.2 and 1.3. Officially, 1.1 and 1.0 was going to be deprecated at the beginning of 2020, but due to all the delays everybody has with the COVID situation, with the COVID-19 situation, they decided, big organizations decided to not deprecate it yet, but it will happen in the near future. Use secure cipher suits. It changes a lot. Encrypt everything on your website. Make sure there's no mixed content, etc., etc. There's a whole lot of things that are in there. Another thing you can do is test your site's configuration. There is a website here that lists about 7 or 8 different testers, online testers that you can just put your URL in there or put your web server in there, and it will test if your SSL or TLS configuration is okay. For the command line users under us, the Linux gurus, there is also the testssl.sh command line. Now, here I want to repeat again, we want you to keep your TLS configuration up to date. It's only by working together and making sure that we all do our piece that will make the Belgian and maybe the global cybersecurity space more secure. Thank you for listening. And I don't know if there are any questions or if there's time for questions. Otherwise, I can answer them later in the questions tab.
Okay, Kevin. Thank you very much for this interesting talk. I'm wondering where the Certi Hunt project will bring us in the coming months and how far we will go with that project. But I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited to see what the results will be. And I hope that we can share some of those results already in our next quarterly event in the month of January. Thank you, Kevin. Maybe I think there is still one question open. Maybe you can answer that one in the question room after you leave.
I will do that for sure. All right. Thank you, Pedro.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'm very glad that I can introduce to you Joost Dam, CISO at PSA Antwerp. Joost is a very good friend of mine. We have been working already a few times together in a few cases, and Joost is for me one of the examples in Belgium when it comes to information sharing and to close collaboration with the national CCERT CCB. Joost, may I invite you please on stage so that you can give your presentation about Emotet attacks on the rise.
Thank you, Pedro.
The floor is yours, my friend.
Thanks. Let me first share my screen. Okay. You can see the screen. Okay. Can you see the screen, please? Hello?
Joost, we saw your screen, so but
okay.
Nobody can answer. You're the only one on stage, so nobody could answer. So try stay here so I can give you feedback. As soon as you have your screen shared, I'll be gone again.
Can you see the screen, please?
Yep. This is okay. You can start.
So we had a recent. We have seen a recent Emotet campaign, and I was asked by Pedro to give an insight on this. About us, so PSA Antwerp is a terminal operator in the port of Antwerp. We operate 3 container terminals and 1 break bulk terminal, largest container handler in the port of Antwerp, part of PSA Antwerp, PSA International, and I'm CISO of PSA Antwerp and also chairman of the ISAC within the port of Antwerp, which was established about 5 years ago. So about Emotet, it's a type of malware that exists.
Joost, you have muted yourself. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Sorry for that. So let's start. Yeah, I was asked to give an insight in the recent attack that we've seen, an Emotet attack. recent campaign was asked by Pedro to give an insight about us. So I'm working for PSA Antwerp. PSA Antwerp is a container terminal operator within the Port of Antwerp. We operate about 3 container terminals in the Port of Antwerp, the largest container handler in the port. We are part of PSA International, and I'm CISO of PSA Antwerp and chairman also of the ISAC. We have an ISAC established within the Port of Antwerp for information sharing purposes and sharing best practices on cybersecurity within the Port of Antwerp. The ISAC was founded about 5 years ago. About Emotet. Emotet was founded somewhere in 2014, mainly as a banking Trojan with the target of German and Austrian banks. Then there was seen a version 2 in 2014, which was more modular, including banking Trojans, but also DDoS, spam, address book stealing modules. As of version 3, it was targeting Swiss banks, and as of version 4, it became more generic, not integrating its own banking module anymore, but loading third-party banking modules, but also being used as a more generic type of malware to link up to other malware and targets. As of version 4, there are also much higher volumes of targeted, mostly spear phishing email messages a day. Another important thing is that as of 2019, that it started with sending payloads embedded in Microsoft Word documents, but enclosed within password-protected zip file containers. Mainly using Microsoft Word documents as a supporting file to include scripting to download the actual malware. What's in the menu, or what are the modules? There's a main module that sets up a communication to a command and control server and starting to download the modules via the CNC server. Then they have a spam module, credential stealing from web browsers, email clients, Outlook, and the likes. A spreader module to spread in the local network. Email harvesting to exfiltrate email content from infected machines and send them to the CNC server as address book stealers. And the current versions include the ability to install malware to infected machines like the ones that have been seen where Twitbot, Qbot, Ryuk, ransomware likes. What are the artifacts or the specifics? Typically, email subjects refer to transactions, payments, invoices. They refer to B2B, genuine business transactions in some cases. The email body itself is often simple and consisting of only of a few sentences. Some cases, it uses email thread hijacking, meaning using legitimate business-to-business emails to emulate them and send them to the targets. Sometimes we see brand abuse using high-profile companies and logos in the body. Some attacks are campaigns linked to holidays, and geographical targeting is also changing these days, originally targeting mostly Germany, UK, US, and Latin America. In terms of the attachments that we see delivered via spear phishing, we see multiple Microsoft Word documents with macros included in it, PDFs linking to Microsoft Word documents and macros, PDFs linking to zip archives, password-protected zip archives with Word documents in it or other scripting. sometimes URLs linking to those same type of documents, Word, zipped, Word documents, scripts. And then if you look to the volumes over the recent years, there was a spike in 2018, early 2019, late 2019, and then it became quite silent until summer period where quite large volumes of spear phishing, emotet spear phishing emails started to get distributed. Now, we have seen such an attack within our organization. The attack was not successful, but I wanted to share some details on the attack itself and how it's linked to the techniques that were earlier described. The attackers itself synchronized with genuine business-to-business email communications in terms of one of the partner companies sending legitimate B2B email communications was sending information to our organization, and the first malicious email, copying that email, we received 1 hour later. So the same type of email format was used together with the attachment of a password-protected zip file, including a Word document with some macros embedded in it. Sender names used multiple variants of the business partners' emails. Email footers were fully copied from a business partner's mailbox. So here we see the extraction of an email of one of the business partners and using that as a base to load the spear phishing email and payload. So we see the email threat hijacking approach. We see the copy of legitimate business emails. We see as another variant, as another artifact, the zip file protected files embedding Word doc files, which are macro enabled. In some cases, we see very large volumes of emails. Here we were talking about hundreds, but very specific to certain departments. What we've seen in other cases in our industry is the same type of emails, but in volumes of thousands, even thousands an hour in some cases. So very large volumes targeting the organizations and also switching in type of payload. Then they try to send password encrypted zip files and password protected zip files. Then they use PDF files, straight Word documents. So they alternate until one of the targets bites in it. So it's using communication from hacked email accounts to the sender's email. And another important one was that we only received that kind of emails during business hours, so Central European time, and no sending of such communication or phishing, spear phishing emails during weekends. That's also what we see in other companies, so that they see to be active during European office hours outside weekends. Word document itself contained a macro which was base64 encoded PowerShell scripting with a lot of unused parameters to obfuscate, which then tries to download the files from hacked domains like WordPress files. Here we see some clean code. So it downloads the modules and other modules it tries to download via those hacked domains and sites. Yeah, we had some more detailed analysis, but I'm not going to dive in it. You see here some hard-coded domains and they're switching as well. Once the main module is installed, yeah, then it's time to go to the menu and install the other modules that they look for or they want to install at the target. In the cases that we have passed, yeah, the attack was not successful, so those type of modules they were not able to install them. But it's clear that once the main module gets installed, then it's up for the other modules to get installed and reach the objectives. Some generic recommendations, I think, are still applicable not only to Emotet, but as a generic protect measures. If you run email attachments in a sandbox prior to delivering them into email boxes, that should partially block this type of attachments. Of course, if the malicious documents are embedded in password-protected zip files with the password embedded into the email in the case, then the sandbox approach will not be sufficient. I will not be able to detect those malicious documents. Blocking macros from running in Office documents download from the internet is always a good idea. In this case, if the document is attached to the email, this will not help you as well, but it's also a good practice to block macros from running on downloaded Office documents. If macros are used within your organization, it is a good idea to have them either fully blocked or block to a selective set of departments or people, or even move to signed macros only. Awareness is still at stake. It is important to educate your users and make them aware to forward such suspicious emails in the attachments, so that cybersecurity teams can start looking into it and check whether others were impacted and fight the attack if required. In case of PowerShell logging, and enabling this on your workstations is always a good idea, and also enable strict EDR antivirus policies to block ransomware attacks as much as possible. So the last one, and very important as well, is have your systems patched to the latest level. As always, it is a multi-level approach. It is not one measure that will block malware to your organization or block this type of attacks. So that's about it for me. We have seen if we go back to the strategy of Emotet, we have seen in the campaigns that we discovered, we have seen several of those strategies, referring to genuine business transactions by copying subjects of regular B2B transactions. Sometimes you see it with invoices as well. The email body was copied from existing B2B emails from a business partner, so using the email thread hijacking approach. Sometimes in some of the cases we saw some simple few sentence email bodies added to it. And then, yeah, in terms of the attachments, we saw it passing with Word documents and Word documents embedded in encrypted, password-protected zip files. That's about it. Thanks for your time.
Okay. Thank you very much for this interesting talk, Joost. Before I forget, I don't know if I missed, but was there a TLP code indicated on your presentation? Is this TLP green amber?
It is green.
So for the records, the presentation was TLP green. I was looking into the polls used, and I was a little bit impressed. Do you have an idea how many people never heard about Emotet?
No idea.
Well, I was quite surprised. It's 42%.
Okay, that's quite a lot.
That's quite a lot. I've seen quite some interesting things. Like there was also a question: has your organization noticed an Emotet attack this year? 22% says yes. And 15% says prefer not to say. That means that they have observed an Emotet, but they just want to tell us. Yep. So that's around 37% that has observed probably an Emotet infection, which is quite a lot. There was also a question that is still open. How exactly were you able to detect the spam malware before execution during your incident?
The initial detection was reported by one of our end users, so awareness still works. If your end user reports that such a document has been received, then that really helps. None of the users in our case clicked on or opened the zip file itself and did run the Word documents. But by being noticed by the end users, we were able to have a deeper look in the full campaign, what the targets were, the volumes of emails, and who was targeted. Okay.
Well, I think that Emotet is here. It is probably going to stay here. Each time they go on holiday for a few months, each time when they come back, they get more sophisticated. See more and more ransomware that is jumping on the wagon of Emotet. I'm afraid that 2021 will be the Emotet year. So I think that an international collaboration and coordination to tackle Emotet will be absolutely necessary in the coming months. Joost, thank you very much for your attribution. I think it was very useful and very interesting for our audience. For your information, at the moment we have 310 people online. Thank you very much, Joost.
Thank you.
I would say we're going to have a beer during the break, but unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 measures, the bar is closed during the break. So sorry for that. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Okay.
We are now at the moment that we can have a little break, a 10-minute break. We'll get back to you a 2:45. So at 14:45, we will be back on stage and we will resume the webinar with the anatomy of a large-scale DDoS attack that will be brought to you by Dirk Jumpert, security manager at URIT. And that talk will be followed by our expert panel talk. See you all back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay. 2:45. That means that it's time to resume our CCB quarterly cyber threat report event for this afternoon. The next presentation will be given by Dirk Jumperts, Security Manager at Qctr. Dirk, may I kindly ask you to join us on stage, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dirk. Welcome to the quarterly event of the Center for Cybersecurity Belgium. As far as I've understood, you're going to bring us a story about the anatomy of a large-scale DDoS attack.
That's the idea, yes.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dirk Jumperts. I am the security manager at Qctr, and this afternoon I would like to give you an overview of a DDoS attack, a long-term DDoS attack we experienced in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Before we start, I'll first give you a short introduction who or what we are. Qctr is a not-for-profit organization, VZW as I say in Dutch. We are headquartered in Belgium, but we have subsidiaries in Italy, Sweden, and the Czech Republic. We're a small organization with 60 people working for us. About a third are technicians, and of those 60 people, about 10% are working in the operations department. Our core business is operating the .eu in Cyrillic and .eu in Greek, top-level domains in concession for the European Commission since 2004, and that's basically the only thing we do. We operate an indirect sales channel of about 700 registrars. Those are the people that sell the domain names. And we've been appointed operator of essential services since 2019 as a result of the NIS directive and the implementation in Belgium. So technically what we actually do means that as a CCTLD registry operator, we run the authoritative name service for the .eu namespaces. We run some registration services via EPP, which is the Extensible Provisioning Protocol. It's a machine-to-machine interface to register domain names. And we also run a registrar extranet over HTTPS. We run public query services via the well-known WHOIS protocol, but also via the web. We have a public website, a registrar website, and a registrant extranet. In short, it's not a lot of things that we are running. It's not like we have a huge public exposure or running any kind of e-commerce services. We are basically not Facebook, Google, or any other of the large tech companies. A little bit of technical context maybe. Our infrastructure is running from 2 data centers that are based in Luxembourg and the Netherlands. From these data centers, we are running the registration services, the public services, and the second-level domain name services for our business. We have 3 Anycast DNS providers for the top-level domains, and we run also our own unicast name servers. For our own domain names like Qctr.eu, registry.eu, and whois.eu, we have 2 Anycast DNS providers and some of our own name servers on the second level that are running from those 2 data centers. From a network and security perspective, we have our own address space, which is quite unique as a small organization to have your own address space. We are AS35733, which is sourced from both data centers. That means that there are 4 IPv4 ranges and 2 IPv6 ranges being sourced from those data centers, with multiple gigabit uplink providers to different transit providers. We were using at that moment in time already layer 7 protection services from Cloudflare for our public websites like Qctr.eu. Some statistics: 3.6 million domain names in our portfolio, approximately 1,500 domain names per day registered, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We support IDN, hence the .eu in Cyrillic and the .eu in Greek. We support DNSSEC, the security extensions for DNS. And since this year, we also have an active program running to prevent abuse of domain names, which is partially based on machine learning and also partially based on rules. This basically allows domain names to get registered, but they will not function because there's something wrong with the registration data. We have 700 accredited registrars, which are typically your web hosters, your telecom operators, brand protection agencies, and resellers, and we have a worldwide presence. So that gives you a context of who we are, what kind of business we are. Let me give you the timeline of the attack. It all started on the 24th of April at around 1 a.m. in the night. And when you wake up and you see a graph like that, you obviously know that you have a major issue. This is the graph of the entire attack of that day. This is the bandwidth graph of the one of the 1 gigabit uplinks, and as you can see, it's completely full. The effect was that some of our registration services were intermittently available. Some of the protected websites had issues in reaching the backend. Some of our second-level name servers had issues. And although all these things happened, the external visibility was quite limited. The resolving of the main and core business, the .eu namespace, was never impacted because these are running on completely different infrastructure through these any-cost providers. Another very interesting effect of this is that we had some issues with a lot of route flapping. So obviously, when your pipes are full, the routers that are doing BGP can no longer communicate with each other. And as a net result, you see that some of your address space is disappearing from the internet or is no longer announced on the internet. And that, as a result, gives you a lot of router announcements per minute on the internet, hence the peak that you can see. So we analyzed that first attack. We saw it was targeted at registry.eu, one of the websites that unfortunately was not protected at that moment in time by Cloudflare. And then when we took a PCAP, in the sense that it was possible to take a PCAP, we saw that it was mostly DNS traffic. So we knew that it was an DNS amplification attack, and with source IPs that were basically all over the place. In our opinion, it would indicate that it's very likely that this was a botnet attacking us through amplification reflection attacks. So what did we do? We requested the uplink provider to blackhole the destination IP. We moved that website to another IP address. We updated our DNS records and we got back online. That took a couple of hours before we figured out how to do this, because especially the blackholing of the destination IP address was not an easy thing to do with the uplink providers. But in the end, this worked and we were back online. At the same time, we started to check mailboxes. We started also to check social media for claiming messages or for ransom notes, but at that moment in time, we didn't find any. The next day, and as you can see on the BGP updates graph, there's another peak happening around the 25th of April. So they were back. So when we went back online, everything was fine. All the services were running, but during the night, they attacked us again. So that made it clear that somebody was watching us, and whatever we were going to do, they would just keep on following us. The attack was quite similar. The same target was targeted, and the effects were exactly the same thing. Still, after 24 hours, there were no claims. We started off, obviously, to inform the BIPT. We informed the CERT-BE and the CCB, and to inform them that we were under attack. The IP address was again blackholed, and then we decided to use some possum tactics. What these actually are, I will explain in a minute. On the Friday evening at 5 o'clock in the evening, we started to reach out to Cloudflare, as we were already a customer of Cloudflare, and they have a product which is called Magic Transit, which is specifically designed for companies that they have their own IP address space and are using BGP. So let me first give you a quick understanding what this actually is. Cloudflare's Magic Transit solution is a solution where they will announce your address space from their data centers and hence attract all the traffic that goes to you. Then they tunnel all the traffic to your data center through GRE tunnels, and then the return traffic, so the answers on all the incoming traffic, is then sent directly from your data center to the end user that has requested the information. This is the most complex DDoS scrubbing service you can buy with any DDoS protection company. So during that weekend, because it was a weekend, we played possum, and the possum tactics were very simple. We played basically the dead possum. We kept the target website offline so that the attacker would think that he was successful. We published a sorry for the inconvenience message on some of our websites. We blacklisted the targeted IP address again. And as a net result, all the other services were kept operational. So the EPP service, for instance, was back operational and we could continue our business. In the meantime, we started to move all the remaining websites behind the Cloudflare level 7 protection. We noticed that the attacker did not shift the target, so apparently that tactic worked. We filed a complaint with law enforcement, which you do via a regular police station, and that works actually quite well. And in the meantime, Cloudflare was preparing the GRE tunnels and the BGP configuration. On the 28th, we started to announce our first /24 through the Cloudflare infrastructure by 1600 hours. And by 1900 hours, everything else was also announced by Cloudflare. At that moment in time, we could stop our possum tactics, and all the services were back online. We immediately noticed that everything was quiet at the front. It seemed that they were gone, which would have been stupid because these kind of services are not easy to implement and they're not cheap. But there was no attack anymore. And one of the big advantages is that we now would have very good insight in the attacker and what was happening because of the dashboards that you get once you are subscribed to that service. They weren't gone because on the 29th, around midnight, they were back. And the initial attack vector was the exact same thing. So it was a UDP volumetric attack, but because now we had insight in how this attack was happening, we could see how big it was. It was actually 20 gigabits, and what it comprised of. So we already knew it was DNS volumetric amplification attack, but it also contained NTP and connection LDAP, something that I didn't know that was also an attack vector is connection LDAP. The attackers saw that this no longer worked, and so they changed. So they switched to a UDP port 37810, and I had to look up what that actually is. And it's apparently some kind of obscure protocol used in IP cameras. But again, that also didn't work because UDP traffic, volumetric UDP traffic is relatively easy to filter by these services. Then they switched to a TCP ACK attack, and that pattern actually got through, which was a big problem. And that's the big peak that you can actually see on the graphic. Cloudflare had issues in detecting that traffic, and so they couldn't block it initially. So they started working on a custom filter, which took them roughly about 4 hours. And our firewalls obviously had issues in dealing with millions of packets per second of TCP ACKs. Once the custom filter was deployed by Cloudflare, it blocked most of the TCP ACK packets, and everything rest can be handled by your standard features of your firewalls, the anti-DDoS features of your firewalls. And that would be the last attack we experienced. Not last attack we experienced, but the last downtime we experienced through that DDoS attack. So by the 30th of April, we would stay up and running. But it would be very interesting for the next 2 weeks to see what the attacker was trying. On the 2nd of May, they changed their modus operandi. So what we saw there is that they suddenly would attack us with 100 gigabits per second. And it seemed to us that apparently they switched on an additional infrastructure to be able to reach those sizes of attack. Again, there were no claims, and we simply have no idea who might be attacking us. We reached out also to our peers. We reached out also to all the people that we know. We are a registry operator, so that means that we have access to ICANN, to Center, different organizations that have comparable people working for them. And the only feedback we got is that whomever is behind this must have very deep pockets, because it would take a lot of money to be able to have a monitored attack for such a long time. These attacks didn't have any effect anymore. Cloudflare mitigated all these attacks, but the attacker didn't stop there. They kept on changing their modus operandi. Again, on the 2nd of May, we saw another change, and this was quite a unique change, where suddenly there was actually a repetitive pattern in their attacks. We call it a 5-5-5-10 pattern, where we would see a 5 minutes attack, then 5 minutes nothing, then 5 minutes again, then 10 minutes nothing, and then it would start all over again. And this pattern would change a couple of times during the next couple of days. All these attacks were volumetric UDP traffic attacks. On the 15th of May, the attack stopped. After a final TCP flood attack that lasted till 3:30 in the morning, it stopped. And since then, we haven't seen anything anymore. So between the 29th of April and the 15th of May, Cloudflare mitigated about 500 terabytes of traffic and 800 billion of packets. And these counters are not exactly 100% correct. They are approximately. So I want to focus now on one analysis we did, because one of the things you have when when using this infrastructure of Cloudflare is that you can actually see geographically spread all over the internet the different attacks happening. And when there's a UDP attack, you see that it's happening all over the place with all the different data centers being lighting up. But when it's a TCP attack, we saw that only a very few data centers were actually impacted. So on the 11th, we saw that there was a TCP ACK flood on a destination port 80 with a target IP address, which is shown in the slides. And the source ports were anywhere between 1024 and 65,535, the so-called ephemeral ports. And the source IP addresses were also all over the place. Now, there was something odd when we were looking at these packets, because every single IP address had an almost exactly the same amount of packets per second, 1.52 packets per second, and there was one that was 3.03, which is the exact double packets per second, which is very low. And this made us think this is kind of weird. So we did a little investigation, and one of the things you can do with the infrastructure is that you can retrieve the individual detected data streams in a JSON format. And so we saw that more than 130,000 unique IP addresses were involved in that attack, with 56,000 unique source ports. And this was all happening in one smaller data center from Cloudflare. If you plot that out in a scatter diagram, you see that this is actually almost a perfect noise scatter diagram. And this made us think that TCP ACK flood would actually be from a very limited amount of machines. We even think it's only one machine, one dedicated server that is crafting these packets and attacking us in such a way. And theoretically, it should be relatively easy to try to figure out who is the owner of that machine, if you can trace it back, because obviously they are using spoofed IP addresses, and that gives an issue, of course, in finding that actual attacker or that machine. So, are there some takeaways of this experience? We were lucky. That's the good. The impact was relatively limited. We are a small organization with a relatively small public footprint, and they never attacked the name server space, so that was okay. We were also lucky because Cloudflare was extremely responsive. They managed to do everything within a weekend, so that was quite impressive to us. Being a small organization, that gives you a lot of agility when it's about these kind of decisions. During the attack, the team that was dealing with this included the general manager, so you can make quite quickly certain decisions. This was also during the first lockdown in Belgium, so the Corona COVID-19 had very little impact on our way of handling this, because we were used to working from home, so that wasn't really a problem. And the switch which frightened us even before this attack, the switch of going to Cloudflare and using that BGP announcement, had very little unexpected impact. So that was also good. The bad part in the lessons learned is that we had partially implemented the anti-DDoS measures from Cloudflare. So we were in the process of doing that, but then we bumped against some hiccups, where we weren't sure if the applications would work correctly. And so then you start having issues with some priorities, and so the migration was postponed for different reasons. And this has actually caused the problem that the public site that you can easily visit, the websites that we are running, were not all protected by the Cloudflare measures, and therefore any adversary who does some reconnaissance would quite easily find these targets. We did have a study on how we could protect our address space, and we knew that one of the ways of doing that was by using these BGP-based scrubbing services. Now, most of these BGP-based scrubbing services only do IPv4. They don't do IPv6. So that was one of the drawbacks that we already knew. And the other thing is that you can't easily test this. It's not like you can set up one machine and then go ahead and try to test it. You actually have to set up entire networks to be able to test this. So we were also always quite hesitant in going into that direction. Still to today, we have no idea who was behind the attack. And obviously, as typically happens, a DDoS attack is always taking you by surprise. Now, the ugly thing is that all this can be prevented, because we know there is a standard, the BCP38 standard, that says that is actually a standard that prevents spoofing of IP addresses. And spoofing of IP addresses, as long as that is possible, as long as that is technically possible, then we will have the problem of DDoS attacks coming back and back and back. And we know in the meantime that ransomware these days is combined with DDoS attacks to put even more pressure on organizations. But there is a standard, there's a technical standard. There's only not the will of implementing that technical standard to actually make sure that IP spoofing is a thing of the past. There have been multiple papers, there have been multiple call for actions, but unfortunately at the moment, IP spoofing is still a very easy thing to do and still happens quite often. And that was our little journey on 3 very exciting weeks at Urit. Afterwards, in hindsight, they were very exciting, but during the attack, they were not so exciting. They were quite stressful. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer the questions.
Okay, Dirk, thank you very much. That was quite an interesting presentation. You will see it for yourself when you read the comments in the chat afterwards. It's a great job by Urit. You have done a great work there by mitigating that DDoS attack. Thank you very much for willing to share this with the public. I think that a lot of people here in the webinar will have learned from it, because I've seen in the polls that 21% of people here, their organizations were victim of a DDoS last year. So this information might be very helpful for them. I have one interesting question that is still open. One person asked, working from home, was that not impacted by the DDoS attack? Guess it was also very difficult to access your infrastructure given it was flooded.
Yes and no. They were only targeting 1/24. Actually, a couple of IP addresses within a /24. That means that the other /24s were still available, and our network is set in such a way that one part of the IP ranges is done from one data center, the other part of the IP ranges is done from the other data center. So we could still access our infrastructure through the other ranges. So there was part of the infrastructure that was not attained by anything. So we could easily access our infrastructure, yes.
Okay, also interesting to know. Well, in that case, I don't think that there are any questions left. Let me take a quick look. No direct questions for you, Dirk. I want to thank you. I hope we can meet again soon in real life. And I can buy you a duvel. That's your habit for this presentation. Okay, thank you, Dirk. I'll see you and talk.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Also, something interesting that I've seen in the polls is that 66% is willing to share information with CCB when it comes to cyber attacks. Well, I would say don't hesitate to inform us. You can always send your information to ews@cert.be or to cert@cert.be. Both email addresses work. And also, I want to motivate people who want to join us during our next quarterly event. If you have any testimony about a cyber attack that you want to share with the cyber community, please let us know. We can discuss that. And maybe, who knows, next time you're on the agenda of the CCB quarterly cyber threat report event. 8 minutes past 3, we are still on schedule. It's time for our expert panel. May I ask Kevin on the floor or on stage, please?
Can you hear me?
Kevin, welcome back. The experts talk, that's your expertise, that's your specialty, so I'm leaving it over to you, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
Have fun.
Thanks. All right, so for the last 45 to 50 minutes, we'll have the expert talk, and we'll talk about a couple of subjects that we already have seen in a couple of presentations, but we'll let a couple of our experts talk about what we're going to do and what else you can do about this. So let me first share my screen here. Going to some screenception first. It's always fun. And there we have the panel discussion. Now, let me introduce you to the panel members. All right. Let me switch some screens here. It's always gone away. So first I would call on the floor is Joost Dam. Joost, I invite you to stage. Please accept there. Next person is Frank Groenewegen from Fox IT. Welcome Joost, welcome Frank. Then we have Noor Fatin from Recorded Future. And Johan Kaluwe from the CCB, one of our cybersecurity experts. All right, so welcome everyone. Let's first quickly introduce yourself. Just say, what you're doing, what your expertise is on a daily basis in your company. Joost, you can start.
Yeah, so I'm CISO of PSA Antwerp, as such responsible for managing cybersecurity, governance, and incident response.
All right, thank you. Then we have, oh, there's a lot of screen switching going on here. Then we have Frank Groenewegen from Fox IT.
Hi, my name is Frank. I'm the Chief Security Expert within Fox IT and mainly involved in running incident response cases and other high-profile assignments and investigations that we do for our customers.
All right, thank you. Next is Noor Fatin from Recorded Future.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Noor. I run technical solutions for our clients across Europe, Middle East, and also here in the UK. Longtime partner of CCB, is happy to be back.
Welcome back. And now we have Johan Kaluwe from Center for Cybersecurity for CERT.be.
Hello, everybody. My name is Johan. I work for the CERT.be as a cybersecurity expert and researcher, also ethical hacker and bug bounty enthusiast.
Thank you, Johan. All right. So let's step into our discussion. So today we'll have a couple of topics. We'll start with DDoS, we'll go to email threat, TLS, all things we've seen before, APT activity, key exploited vulnerabilities, and the outlook to the rest of 2020 and to 2021. So let's start with DDoS and ransom DDoS or RDDoS. So in August and September, multiple ISPs in mostly the Benelux, France, Netherlands, and Belgium, but there were a couple of other European countries that have been involved too. These ISPs were targeted with DDoS attacks on their infrastructure and mostly on their DNS infrastructure. Now, at the same time, we also saw all these ransom nodes going over the world. This was all over the world, so not only limited to Europe, but we saw this in the financial, retail, travel, and e-commerce sector, that all of these companies received ransom nodes, and within 6 days they had to pay or else. We saw a couple of attacks there. Now, Frank, do you have any idea who could be behind these campaigns, and if they are at all related to each other?
I think that's a difficult question, and if I reply to the previous presentation, which was actually a great presentation, so thank you for that. Usually these spoofed DDoS attacks, I mean, that's still, we are in 2020 today, but it's still a big problem because it's very difficult to identify where it's actually coming from. In really some investigations that we've led in the last couple of years, we were able, with a lot of work and fast cooperation from big ISPs, transit providers, etc., we were able to find out by looking at the core routers explicitly which port was giving the traffic to which other AS, for example, to find out that it was actually coming from a VPS within Qctr, a bulletproof hosting. But then it could be a nation state, could be a criminal organization, it could be a kid student, you're a script kiddie just playing around, don't really understanding what the havoc is. It's difficult.
Yeah, it's indeed very difficult for the entire cybersecurity community. Now, you say that it's very hard to see what's happening there, to know what's going on, but we've seen these two attacks. So we've seen the ransom DDoS against our financial infrastructure and others, and we've seen the DDoS that were really targeting that DNS infrastructure and those routers for our ISPs. Luckily for us, luckily for Europe, most ISPs had a very small impact. There were some that were down for some time, but luckily most were big enough to handle all the traffic. Now, if we look at these attacks, why would somebody do this? Does any one of you have any hypotheses of why these ISPs would be attacked, or why somebody would do this? For ransom, I think it's pretty clear they want the money and they want to try, but still for the others, what's going on there? What could be the reason behind it? Maybe Noor, you have an idea?
Let's talk about that for a second. So I think motivations can be many. If you think about why someone would perform such a task, you have to think about what they have to gain from it. So let's think about a couple of different things that they could gain. Maybe they're testing that ISP's infrastructure. So can that ISP handle such an attack? If they can, maybe we need to think of other ways to amplify the attack so that it's stronger. Or some are just flexing their power, maybe to potential customers of theirs. So I think later on we're going to talk about Emotet, and I really want to cover sort of the economy of how these services are brought up. As a proof of your service being effective, you might try to take down a Belgian ISP and prove the power or the potential potency of the DDoS solution that you're offering. I think for a script kiddie or an amateur to go straight for the jugular and target an ISP is quite unlikely. I would have expected maybe opportunistic attacks against maybe random companies, but the fact that it's targeted at an ISP shows some sort of need to either prove a point or to test that ISP's capability to deter such attacks. I don't know what the panel thinks, but frankly, those are the only real conclusions that we can come up with as a team, maybe. Yeah.
I agree with what you say, Noor. If it was a single ISP or maybe another ISP, but the things that we've seen happening here in the Netherlands, even my ISP had trouble, and I'm looking television over IPTV, and for some reason they went down, and even my television stopped working for a couple of hours. So I was impacted, but definitely, usually you hope that somebody claims to be responsible for it on social media, right? Or they ask for a ransom, or at least something where you can see who might be behind it and why. But if it stays completely quiet, then that's also from an investigative point of view, it becomes very difficult to understand why is it happening, even if it's happening at so many different ISPs in even different countries, but using the same MO.
Yes. I think Frank also made a really good point, Kevin, which is, attribution is extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. So I'm tempted to say, attribution isn't as important when it comes to DDoS as focusing on mitigation steps. Just accept that it might happen to you. You're not going to know who it was most of the time. You just have to be ready for it. So mitigation steps, mitigation steps, mitigation steps. Be ready for it. That's probably the lesson that I would give to the audience.
Yeah. And as the audience can see, this will be throughout the whole presentation. On the right side of every slide, we try to put a couple of tips and tricks for you to protect yourself against this threat. Now, there is one question from the public. It's from Mark Val. Thank you, Mark. And he's asking, how about reflective DDoS approach? Anybody of you willing to answer on that one?
We have seen such attacks earlier this year based on Memcache, the reflective and amplified DDoS attacks. So what you see in general is that you see that kind of attacks and amplified attacks, basically or mostly on UDP-based volumetric attacks using memcache, NTP, DNS, and like protocols. That's what we have seen from our experience.
Okay, thank you. Now, Johan, I know there's you have a history of being an ethical hacker at Integrity. Now, do you have any anything to add on these DDoS attacks, on these amplification attacks, this high volume attacks going on?
Well, my experience with denial of service, not distributed denial of service, is more that in the bug bounty scene we encounter a real problem where we have application level denial of service unwillingly. So as testers, we try things out and we try to generate requests that are invalid or have an unexpected response, and often unwillingly we bring down the target, when that was not our intention to do so. So luckily in the bug bounty scene, it's a short feedback loop where the target can say, hey, we're having troubles here, can you stop your testing, and then it's all sorted out. But I was wondering, why don't we see that kind of attacks in the wild? Because if I heard these things, ransom DDoS, why bother with all the hacked IoT devices directing traffic to you, and it's very noisy when you can just send one request and bring down a target if it's just sufficiently targeted and sufficiently researched. Let's say, for example, I had a case where you could upload a profile picture and it was automatically scaled by the application. So what I do is I send the picture with a modified header saying it has 65K pixels in width and 65K pixels in height. I send the image, the application tries to scale the image, runs out of RAM, and then the auto scaling in the cloud kicks in, and all kinds of instances are being started up, and this ended up costing a lot of money for the target because of all the services that were being started up. And it's a real problem in bug bounties. We have to be really careful not to bring down the target, and you do it without even knowing that you do it. So I was wondering, why don't we see that kind of attacks in the wild? Maybe the panel has an idea. Is it because it's too bespoke? It's too tailored to
I think it takes, if I may, it takes research. That's what you already said, and you are actually already working on an assignment where you have to do that research for a different goal.
Exactly.
What we mainly see happening with denial of service is that I would say I think 80% random booter services are just being used, and I saw that in the previous presentation as well, where you see this, the attack sequences of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, of 30 minutes. That tells me automatically, oh, there's likely someone using a free or for a couple of $1 booter website that's just attacking you. And unfortunately, while we are in the year 2020, that usually does already the trick with bringing down their targets with these simple attacks. So why would they spend a lot of time researching? And on the other hand, I think the people that are launching these attacks from just these simple booter services, they don't even have the capabilities to do what you do, Johan, so to find those DOS bugs and abuse those.
And I think if you're going to dedicate so much time and resources to a target, you're not going to dedicate it to DDoSing them effectively. You're probably going to spend more time into intrusion and actually getting inside the network rather than spending all that effort just to DDoS the client or the target. You could have dedicated that amount of time and research to actually breaching or compromising some machines on that host network.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All right, let's end this. Let's end the topic.
Maybe one takeaway in terms of that kind of attacks, you don't have to run the actual protocol that is attacking you. Eh? So it's not because you have a DDoS attack sending NTP, memcache, whatever type of messages that you have to run the service.
Yep, that's true. Thank you for the insight, Joost. Now, any some last note here? if you see or if you receive any ransom from, supposedly Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear, or APT28 or APT29, Lazarus Group, Armada Collective, or anything else, you seem to have 6 days until they start attacking. So try to, go into these, spend your money that you would pay in Bitcoin to them, and spend it on your defense. And that defense will still be there after the attacks. Let's go to Emotet, our next topic on the slide. Now, my system doesn't like to go to the next slide, apparently. Okay, there we are, finally. All right, so Emotet. So maybe some of you know what Emotet is, but can someone explain to our public, what the Emotet network actually does? Most of it was already explained by Joost in his presentation, but there's anything you would like to add on this? Anything that they are related to? Frank, maybe you can start this one.
Yeah, I think, Joost already showed what the Emotet network, how it works, what it operates, and I think they changed from doing the fraud themselves, right, in the banking fraud, to just use their network to sell to whoever pays them money to deploy their payload at the end on the Russian underground forum. So I think what makes them very dangerous is what Joost explained earlier, is that they copy emails and they reply to conversations that are already ongoing. So therefore people really think that they have an email coming from Joost replying to an email that you were already talking about with Joost, for example, and therefore they click on it. And you especially see that, for example, in Germany, Cert Bund is even warning about it, because if they only have some infections, for example, within some government entities or within some critical infrastructure, they steal the whole address book and the credentials, but also they'll start spamming those users. So you could probably tell that with only a couple of infections, they could reach a whole lot of important people or people working for critical infrastructure, government entities, etc., replying to already real email threats, which makes them, I think, a very dangerous group with a dangerous MO.
Yeah, good insight. Now, some reports say that the Emotet network, and we've seen that already in Joost's presentation a bit, is that it's advertised as an access as a service system. Now, it's been used to spread a trick bot. It's been used to spread ransomware, among others. Now, these services, are they just sold on the dark web, and is there one campaign, one person, or one actor group behind Emotet that's selling these services to others, or do you think that they may be, could be the same threat actor, and they're just working together? It's just a big group that's working together, and that's how they try to infect everyone by using their own infrastructure. Noor, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I think to understand and answer that question, we have to talk a bit about how the underground economy works. So, there's three real players in the economy. You have someone who wants to drop a malicious file or payload. You have someone who owns a reputable botnet or exploit kit like Emotet. Now, there's also the emergence of a middleman in between those two, who will facilitate the transaction between the person who wants to drop their file, and the botnet owner. Meaning, I have a strain of ransomware that I want to deploy amongst many machines. I will reach out to the middleman, the PPI provider or pay per install, and I will pay a certain amount per machine that I want to install my payload on. That PPI provider will then leverage the botnet to deliver those infections onto machines. So there's a really strong, sophisticated link between all three players. So regardless of who owns TrickBot and who owns Emotet, there's strong relationships between prospective buyers of installs and prospective providers of installs. And the catch here is that, let's say I'm trying to deploy a ransomware strain on 1,000 devices, and I use the PPI provider. The profitability is quite low because I'm paying for a premium service, and I just want to get as many installs as I can. Whereas it's not very opportunistic, it's not very targeted. So in order for me to get a more targeted network, I have to reach out to someone who's advertising in maybe a particular organization and then spend, $20K as opposed to maybe the $200 that I would have spent per install for a large distribution. So I think to answer the question, they're all related in the sense that they all contribute towards a very sophisticated economy. Which affiliate network that individual uses depends on their budget and on their motives as well. So I think there's a lot of factors that play here that dictate which network you go for in the end.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody have any other insights here?
If I may reply to that, I agree, but I think Emotet, what Pedro said, it's becoming a real big threat. And why? You could even say that Emotet, it does no longer, they do not longer need a lot of size, a big botnet size, but they need quality. So they need to make sure that they have a lot of stage 1 access or infections within mid-sized to large companies, because at the end their customers, which is the Trick/RUK or Zloader or other criminal groups, they specifically probably ask Emotet, hey, we're looking for they're probably browsing through the catalog of the infections that they have, and they say, okay, we're interested in this specific infection. So RUK is not buying 100 infections or 1,000 infections. Now they're probably paying big money for single infections, where they need to manually start working on those single infections in a very targeted fashion to monetize.
Yeah. Monetize using ransomware or something else. For example, RUK. Okay, cool. So, Joost, this is a question I want to ask you because it's totally related to what you presented to me this afternoon. It was awesome presentation. What kind of behaviors are to be expected for companies in here? I mean, you've been in the middle of that attack on your company, on PSA. Was there anything specific that you can give as a tip to our public so that they need to look into, that they need to look out for?
In terms of specifics to the attack?
Yeah, or certain behavior that they can expect on their systems, targeted to them, for example?
Well, the attack itself was blocked, so we did not see any behavior on machines itself. But what we do see and what we have seen in the industry, so not only in our organization, is that the specifics to the Emotet attack, meaning distributing Word documents, whether or not they're zipped and password protected, is something that they have in common. Quite large volumes of emails and repeating them, so in the hope that someone bites it. So the volumes of the emails were quite large. We have interacted with another targeted organization, and they had even seen much higher volumes in the thousands. So that's what we found very specific to this campaign. And in terms of mitigation, we come back to the generic approach on macros and embedded macros in Office documents. Are still a pity to deal with.
All right, thank you. Johan, I think there's something you want to announce now. So you have done some research in the last couple of months on the Emotet network. What can you already tell us about your research? I mean, it's not finished yet, but what can you already give the public about this one?
At CERT we do some original research. So on one side, we follow up on all the research that's being done by researchers worldwide, but we also concentrate on specific parts of the infection chain to perform our own original research with some interesting findings, which I'm not allowed to disclose the specifics of, but I can give you a broad idea. So what we see here now is the infection chain with the green arrows indicating points where the blue teams can take either proactive or reactive measures to counter the Emotet infection, most of which has already been explained by Joost, so I won't go into detail in that. But essentially, the Emotet infection is born in a biotope of hacked PHP websites. So Emotet has thousands and thousands of hacked websites under its control, where the infection is born. So that is where all the malicious documents are generated. That is where all the emails are being sent, where the second stages are being hosted. Also some command and control infrastructure we see there. So Emotet uses about 600 domains per email campaign. So these are domains that they are willing to give up. After 6 or 8 hours, most of these domains are known by all the security vendors and are already blocked by people subscribed to those lists. So it's a very short lifespan that those domains have once they have been used in such a campaign. But of course, to sustain that, Emotet needs also the influx of hacked websites. So they are actively searching all those websites that they can hack and use to generate their documents and stuff. So that's a part where we are concentrating up to map and scan this shell space, this network of hacked websites, in order to provide a rapid response, so that we can not only respond to domains that have been confirmed to be Emotet, but maybe also a little bit beforehand, so we can have a view on what shells Emotet is using and are going to use in the near future. And with that, we hope we can make life a little bit more difficult for them. So that's in the beginning of the infection chain where we concentrate ourselves on, and also on the very last part, the command and control infrastructure of Emotet is really something worthy of its own research subject. The C2 infrastructure of Emotet is not unlike any others. They use tiered infrastructure, a whole proxy chain of command and control structure. So we're trying to map that. Unfortunately, when you're doing research, sometimes you find good stuff that can help the blue team and the defender. Sometimes you find stuff that is not so good news, that means that the network is more resilient than we thought. But in any case, even in that part, we have some interesting findings to map out and query IP addresses to find which IP addresses have an Emotet infection or not. And to do that, we use the mechanics of the malware itself to query the C2 infrastructure and map it out.
Thank you very much, Johan. Right, so great research being done by Johan and a couple of colleagues of ours. Now, there's a couple of things I want to mention here. A thank you, actually, for many people within the community that are sending information to CCB Citrus and to CCB in general. Information like infections, Belgian IPs that were infected with Emotet, or Belgian IPs that are used as a C2 server, or Belgian, IPs or infrastructure, or victims that are seen by any other research done in the world. So keep them coming, because we try to inform all of those people. We try to identify, as we will do with the CertiHunt project. We try to identify all of those victims, all of those infections, all of those C2s, and try to cooperate with as many people as possible to get rid of everything. We're not Microsoft. We haven't been able to do any attacks on something like TrickBot, but we'll do what we can do. To come back to TrickBot, actually, so we've seen the attacks done by Microsoft and by the US Cyber Command on TrickBot. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Are there any thoughts on that one? Does that impact in any way, or does that maybe impact the Emotet network by itself, or is this only for TrickBot? Any takers?
Well, it's a difficult question to judge whether or not this has any impact on their infrastructure. I think so. I'd like to think so. Whether or not, well, we saw it with the talk about the DDoS. It's not always visible to the outside what kind of problems there are on the inside, and I think we should continue or internationally push these kinds of actions and make life as difficult as we can for those actors, even though if we're not really seeing any effects, there might still be effects internally, and it might still frustrate them a little, make it more plausible that they're going to make a mistake and such. So yeah, I think it's positive, and I think we should keep doing that.
It's actually a really good point, because one of the main reasons why popular dark web marketplaces and forums crumble is because of internal politics, right? Admins screwing over other admins, running away with the intellectual property or the funds, leaving everyone in the dark. So Johan's absolutely right. If you apply enough pressure, you might even force cracks within the internal workings of such botnets and such affiliate networks.
I'm usually a little more skeptic. I do encourage, and I like the way that of the whole approach. But on the other end, if I talk about our own research, we've done a lot of research into EvilCorp, one of the other groups that is launching ransomware. The FBI, even a couple of those criminals who seem to be responsible for running that group are on the FBI most wanted list. They know exactly who they are, what they look like, their passport, etc. We know where they are. There's a $5 million bounty on their head. We saw from the top of my head that when the FBI got out with the news that they knew who they were, they're on the most wanted list, they are on Interpol, that they stopped operating for a couple of months, but they are just completely back, even with a new ransomware family. They're internationally causing a lot of havoc again. So I'm asking myself, after these type of operations, I mean, I'd love to see that it's working, but on the other end, it really works if you arrest the criminals. And as long as we don't arrest the criminals, and the criminals, even if we know who they are sitting in countries that don't extradite these people, then it might work, but I'm a little skeptical if it's really doing the damage that we want.
I mean, and also resilience is one thing that these groups have shown. So how long have we been talking about Emotet and TrickBot now? For how many years have we been talking about this group?
Yeah, but these groups are operational from 2014, right? So they know how to operate their whole C2 infrastructure. They know how to have backup domains within Tor, for example, so that if you completely take out all of the C2s on the public internet, you need to know what the Tor addresses are and where they are physically, again, located to completely take down. So at the end, you really need to arrest the criminals or hack the infrastructure or the machines that they operate from to completely understand what their network looks like to take it down. Because at the end, if you don't do that, then after a couple of days, they learned from their mistakes that maybe the security community took advantage of taking a part of their botnet down. They fixed that. They are even more resilient in the future. And even, I mean, that's the cat and mouse game, right?
Kevin, also one thing is that the huge amount of effort from Microsoft and US Cyber Command was a lot of it had to do with the upcoming election, right? To try and minimize the any foreign cyber influence on the election or potential compromises to the election process. So it might have helped in the short term to make things difficult and to minimize that impact. Long term, I'm not sure. I mean, let's see how it pans out. But I think the election had a huge part in such a colossal effort by government and private sector, excuse me. Yeah.
yeah, we'll see. Let's go to the next topic, TLS. So, as we've seen in the previous presentation that I gave you this afternoon, I hope some people understood it. TLS is a very important part of our whole cycle. There was somebody in chat who said, "Hey, why not explain the whole cycle from your server to all the things you can do in between until you get to the user, and all the different protections you have on DNS level, on HTTP, TLS level, etc., etc." Now, there's indeed a lot to say on TLS, but is there anything else, next to making sure that our TLS is up to date and our operations are there and are fine? Is there anything we can do as defenders to leverage TLS in our advantage? Frank?
Yeah, I mean, we actively get a lot of value from the monitoring the transparency logs from a lot of CA providers at the moment. So for the people that don't know what it actually is when you request a certificate, it doesn't even matter what certificate, but if you're if you're a good CA provider, you would daily or maybe even with an API just publish your transparency logs that just shows which certificates for which domain has been registered with the public key, so you can check again if it's correct, etc. But you can also use it as an advantage. So if you know that a certificate gets created for a company where the company doesn't even request that certificate for themselves, that could indicate that something's wrong. Or you could get a lot of intelligence from just looking at those transparency logs. And we've managed to detect, for example, spear phishing campaigns that were about to happen by only monitoring those transparency logs for domains that were typo squatted or that were just looking like our customer's domain name, for example. So that's very valuable thing with TLS, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add on the defensive side before we go to the offensive side?
I think it's definitely worth commenting that all the effort that a threat actor puts into building their infrastructure prior to that attack can be done without raising any flags, right? So just the creation of a certificate blows their cover if you're looking at certificate transparency logs. So it's a really good way to preempt attacks before they occur. No matter how long it took for that threat actor to develop the infrastructure in the background, from the day the certificate is registered, you now have a heads up almost. More so than if the domain is registered, because the domain could be registered, it doesn't have a valid certificate. So, certificate transparency logs are even more important than domain registration, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for the extra insight. Now, is there anyone who has an idea on how threat actors could leverage the same thing, but also leverage TLS against us with certificates?
Yes, indeed. Well, certificates can also provide a good source of information for an attacker. So, for example, if you're attacking a target, a lot of information can be extracted from the subject alternative name field in the certificates. So, for people who don't know this, so you can ask for a certificate for www.website.com, but there's a field in the certificate where you can specify which other domains this certificate should be valid for. And a lot of the time, companies are just putting in domain names in there just in case they gotta use it. But for attackers, this is really valuable information to expand your scope, to expand your attack surface, or even for a view into the structure of the internal domains. This can be really valuable information for an attacker. So if you're creating certificates, keep that in mind, that if you're disclosing internal domain names, internal host names in your certificates, they can be used against you.
Yeah, so a good tip here from Johan, try to separate those certificates with your internal and your external domain names. Now, to go to the next subject, which is Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. This is just a list. We won't go deep into them, but this is just a list of what we've seen active in the last quarter, in Q3. So we saw APT 2829, which is supposedly Russia, targeting your COVID-19 research center.
You can read supposedly, Kevin.
Yeah, okay. I have to be. So Frank says not supposedly, so they did attack, and also targeting U.S. elections. Then North Korea, or DPRK related groups, targeted finance, e-commerce, and ransomware for financial gain. And then we come to something new, which is apparently a new Chinese threat actor, a new Chinese APT, who targeted the Vatican, among other things. Nor, do you have anything to say, as Recorded Future apparently saw this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a really interesting story. I'm going to try and condense it down, and I'm also going to say why any of this has any relation to Belgium and CCV, but it will make sense in a bit. So, backstory: what's happening? So, for many years now, Chinese state-sponsored groups have targeted religious minorities within China. That's just an observation that we've made over many years. So, even more backstory. The Vatican and Beijing actually severed ties back in 1951 when the Communist Party took over and took power. In that time, the Vatican actually maintained good relations with Taiwan, which China sees as sort of a rogue state or a renegade state that it needs to control. So since then, there are two parallel churches within China. There's the state-controlled official Christian church, and there's also an underground church which is loyal to the Vatican. So through our research, we started to observe a command and control server communication between Vatican hosts and a well-known piece of malware called PlugX, which was previously used by a Chinese threat actor group called Mustang Panda. It was a slightly different variant, but very similar to the one used by Mustang Panda. So our research showed that multiple spear phishing attempts to target key individuals within this underground church within China. So the phishing lures are actually really interesting. So one pretended to be sort of an official letter from the Vatican to the current head of study missions in Hong Kong. So that's like the equivalent of, or the main contact between China and the Vatican. So a really interesting phishing lure that was used to pretend to be an official document from the Vatican. There was also another phishing lure for another key individual within the underground church that was basically spoofing as a news bulletin for the upcoming national security law changes in Hong Kong, both of which were lures for PlugX. So both phishing lures were used to deliver the PlugX payload. Now, we observed this, our researcher supports this. We monitor the communication between PlugX and those targeted machines. What does any of this have to do with CCV and Belgium? Well, a lot actually, because in all the cases that we observed, our very own CCV, and a huge thank you to Pedro for this, played a really important role in setting up the contact between Recorded Future and the Vatican. And other international organizations that I can't really mention for now. So it was actually CCB made it possible for us to take this research and make it actionable and take it straight to the organization and other involved organizations as a whole. So a huge effort from CCB to turn research that Recorded Future had and alert the relevant entity, no matter how big that entity is. So a very interesting story from start to finish that leads straight back to our very own CCB. Yeah.
Thank you, Noor. And as we can see, Duvel even helps.
Yeah. Duvel helps solve targeting of religious minorities.
Yeah. All right, amazing. Now, there's one thing for the access of certain organizations. Apparently, Iranian groups at the moment are specializing in trying to access certain organizations and just selling those on the underground hacking forums. How does it actually work? Do we have any idea, and do we know how much they ask for this access? I see Noor nodding, so maybe you can take it.
Well, I feel like I've been talking for ages. I wanted to maybe give other members of the panel a chance to speak. If not, I can go, Kevin. I mean,
so anyone else interested to give their view on this one? No, not really. Okay, Noor, go ahead.
So, I mean, what do you want me to focus specifically on the prices, or what was the focus here?
The focus is on how they do this. Like, how do they get into these companies? Because we know from Iran that they mostly target VPN services and things like that. So it's just focusing yourself on, fixing your vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Good enough, or do we need to?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, in which case we need to talk about Pulse VPN. So we've seen. We all saw the crippling vulnerabilities in some VPN infrastructure towards the end of last year. It made a huge splash. There were vulnerabilities in Citrix NetScaler, Pulse Secure, and Fortinet VPN providers. So we've now seen threat actors take advantage of those vulnerabilities by scanning the internet for such exposed infrastructure. So if they find a host with such a vulnerability or such a VPN service on top, they will then actively target that machine. So it gives threat actors of a nation state level a very good and easy avenue into VPN services within a network organization. So the approach isn't complicated. It's simply just performing open scanning of infrastructure, finding infrastructure that matches the ones that you're looking for, and then taking advantage of a vulnerability that is A, extremely critical, and B, quite frankly, neglected up until November of last year when it made a splash. But maybe some organizations still haven't fixed those vulnerabilities. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if anyone else.
On the other end, Noor, they just use whatever low-hanging fruit they see, right? So if it's Citrix, or if it's Pulse VPN, if it's F5, if none of those are available at the moment, they start using spear phishing again with the same techniques, with some open source intelligence that they gathered from LinkedIn profile, whatever. I mean, it's so easy these days. It doesn't even matter if you're a criminal or a nation state. Every now and then we call them APT, right? But in most of the investigations that we run, there's not a real A anymore, because you don't need to be advanced, you only need to be persistent. So
I think
be advanced.
I think another thing, to the point of lowering the bar and removing the A from APT, we've seen so much use of popular red team tools by APTs. So the tools that we're all used to for pen testing, like Cobalt Strike, Metasploit, Veil, these tools are now being used by nation state sponsored groups. So the bar is even lower to use such open source tools and it makes attribution impossible. And it also means that new players can join the global scene very easily, because you've got nations that never had advanced offensive security capabilities coming onto the scene, and you wonder how quickly they did so. It's because the tools are there for them to use. So like Frank said, it's low-hanging fruit, very, very low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, so we need to take care of that low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
That brings me to the next slide here, key exploited vulnerabilities. We won't go into this, just want to show this to our public. Please make sure that you fix all the vulnerabilities mentioned on this slide. Take a screenshot or whatever. You need to fix these because they are being exploited in the wild, and most of them have a CVSS score of 10 on 10. So make sure you fix them as soon as possible. This is highest priority. Now, if we go to the outlook, we're still seeing COVID-19 research organizations being targeted by state-sponsored groups. We see those COVID-19 teams coming back. Like last week, there was again a little bit of a COVID-19 team in Belgium that we saw with our Beefish project. By the way, keep on coming, guys. Keep on sending those things to suspect or suspicious at savonweb.be. It's very interesting information for us. But we see also phishing campaigns, teamed with other subjects. Everything that's in the news, everything that they can lure people with, doesn't matter, they will use it. Now we come back to ransomware. And in ransomware, we see a couple of extortion techniques. We saw encryption, that we've already seen. We see the publishing of stolen data if people don't pay. And as already mentioned before, we see some people in the DDoS section, we see some, actually one group, the SunCrypt ransomware, the group behind SunCrypt ransomware, is now using DDoS threats and doing a little bit of those DDoSes on their websites of the victims to make them pay. This is like something new, which we'll probably see in the rest of Q4 and maybe. These are the top ransomware families, so if you want to protect against one of them or against some ransomware, have a look at these ones. And there's one last question, and then we will end this session. I want to ask all of our panel members, what do you think is the biggest threat or challenge we face as defenders in the coming months or years? And do you have any last tips or tricks or life lesson to give to our public? Joost, maybe we can start with you.
Well, the weak part in the chain is still the user which is attacked directly, and then having your systems patched on time. I think that's still one of the challenges that we see today, and that will last for quite some time, I suppose. So awareness, patch management, vulnerability management stays important, and as shown today, the fact that it's so easy to buy distributed and other types of attacks makes it difficult, and that will stay so, I suppose.
Thank you. Now, same question for Frank.
Well, it's a very difficult question, Kevin, to come up with an answer in 2 minutes. But I mean, at the end, we are not even capable of fixing the basics. If I see that ReUK is capable of coming into a network, this is a corporate network, this is a big organization, and within 6 hours, gain domain admin credentials, deploy ransomware, and ask $100,000s, not even millions of dollars.
Yep.
This shows that we are all failing at the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say you have to start doing vulnerability management, patch management, testing, etc. But if the basics are just not in place, then it's just waiting for a group like ReUK to get a stage 1 infection from a motet or another botnet inside of your organization, come in and do their tricks. So I would at least advise to start monitoring, and I would advise to start testing. With testing, I mean digital fire drills. It's not a pen test and it's not a red team, because maybe that's too much, but start testing. How fast would you even see if someone just coming in from a client is capable of getting domain admin, and do you even have the chance to see that and respond to that? And in a lot of organizations, we've seen that they are not capable at all, not even in 6 hours, but also not even in 6 months. So,
all right. Thank you, Frank. Noor, do you have anything to add there?
Definitely something to add. I think the point around basics, we keep saying this, but it keeps becoming true. But I'm going to take it one step further, where the basics are even more important now, because the bar has been placed so low for a threat actor to partake in cyber criminal activity. So because the sophistication level is so low right now, and the door is wide open, the basics are extra important, more so than they were before. And I'm going to take it one step further. Because of the pandemic, which is the elephant in the room, your entire footprint that used to be physical now has to be digital. There's no way to avoid that. Everything you relied on from a security perspective physically has had to be ripped and put into the digital world. So that's extremely important, because how fast can you do so? And that's bound to leave gaps because you're going to do it in a rushed manner. It's going to be scrappy and you're going to leave holes. So a couple of things there. Basics, the COVID making our lives even more digital than it was before, and the fact that the bar is so low right now for a threat actor to partake in cybercriminal activity.
All right, thank you. Then Johan?
Well, to end on a positive note, I think a trend we're seeing last years is that more and more companies are coming out with that they're being hit by ransomware and explaining how they handled the whole situation. And I think this is a real positive trend, and I can only hope that some decision makers are thinking about what if this happens to us? Can we run some scenarios? This can be a tabletop exercise. So what if it happens to us? And if they then realize, yeah, this could also happen to us, then they could set aside some budget and make things like the basics a bit better.
All right, thank you, everyone. Yeah, so very interesting tips and tricks for our public. There's a couple of things here on the right which involve the basics mostly. So definitely have a look at these. Have a look at our cyber guide. Have a look at the CIS top 20, things like that. We also see at CCB that more and more companies in Belgium are indeed telling us that something happened. They don't have to make it public, but they're at least telling the CCB that something happens. And this way we can get a better view and better protect everyone. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. And now I will give the floor back to Pedro.
I couldn't join stage because your presentation was still open and the stage was full, Kevin. Very interesting discussion. Again, a lot of input. Thank you very much, Frank Groenewegen. Thank you very much, Jos Dams. Thank you very much, Noor Verteen, and also our own beloved colleague, Johan Kaluwe. Thank you, Kevin, for moderating this expert panel. I was just looking into some numbers. I've seen that during the webinar, 35 more people have registered. So that means that we have more than 500 registrations at the moment. We had of 320 people that were live joining this webinar. I want to thank you, Kevin, but also our colleagues in the back end, behind the scenes. I think that Sandro, PJ, Sebastian, Peter, and so many others have done a great job by moderating or answering questions, all that kind of stuff. I want to thank also the people for spending the whole afternoon, or the whole morning, or the whole evening with us. And I hope that we can invite you for our next webinar that will be somewhere in January. Anyway, normally after a webinar or after a quarterly event, we always go for a drink, but this time I think I will have to do it on myself here in my home. See you later, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and cheers, everyone.
Waarde wachters, laat mij dit account betreden.
Heb ik een wachtwoord?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Nee, iedereen. Kan een beetje sterker, hè. Met hoofdletters en ook cijfers, kom.
Laat, mijn hoofdletter, de ridder binnen. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Ook mijn speciaaltekens.
Laat, mijn hoofdletter, de ridder binnen. de ridder binnen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Underscore, slash, hashtag, schuine streep, komma, dubbelpunt, uitroepteken, uitroepteken, uitroepteken.
Die een hashtag. Was dat voor dat uitroepteken?
Ja.
Bestaat al.
Hallo jongen, hoe kan dat nou? Kom Paljester, we zijn hier weg.
Die hebben we goed liggen gehad.
Wachtwoorden zijn niet meer van deze tijd. Bescherm je online account met 2-stapsverificatie. Meer info op safeonweb.be.
Wachtwoord. Hallo, Rood. Amusement.